Guys, I'm not in love with the doctrine of hell, but I am in love with Jesus. And sometimes the doctrine of hell inhibits people from their love affair with Him. And so I'm taking some time to explore this book with my friend Keith. And we are in chapter 2 today. So enjoy. We're back at it again, Keith, because that first video just wasn't controversial enough, so we just keep going with it.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I was pretty shocked. That was
Yeah.
way more than I expected.
What a reaction, but got a lot of good feedback as well. And by the way, I got my actual copy. It's a um, it's a sneak peek copy that no one
Mhm.
else has rights to, other than maybe you have your
Yeah,
copy
let me
there
got
too.
mine. Yep, mine just came the other day. So
So I want to talk to you about chapter 2 really quick, if it's okay. Now, you
yeah,
start off chapter 2 and you say the very first line, most Christians today are obvious or oblivious, as to how much the church has shifted on the doctrine of hell over the centuries. What do you mean shifted? As if, that there
yeah,
was a holy shift that happened or something?
yeah. Well, and we briefly touched on it in the previous couple of videos. This
Yeah.
idea that from the beginning, right? If we study church history, there were always three different groups of people, three different people that all read the same scriptures, but came away with three different understandings of what the Bible was saying
Yeah.
about hell. And so we talked about that, but the thing that people are unaware of is that not only were there always three views, the majority view was of the three views was universal reconciliation or patristic
Right.
universalism. And so
Which
there's
is shocking when you first
oh
hear that. But
yeah,
then I love the way in this chapter you talk about the different theological schools. Could you just briefly just give them a taste of it, because they have to read
yeah,
it for themselves? But that
yeah,
was
yeah.
brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing, and this is probably for me personally, this was one of the key things that first helped me to shift my thinking on this topic. Um,
Yeah,
I came across this and in some of my studies, and I was like, oh, no way. So this is actually a quote from it's the new Schaff Herzog Christian Encyclopedia, and it
yeah.
says it talks about how the earliest system of universalistic theology was Clement of Alexandria, and he was the head of a theological school in that city until 202 A.D. And his successor in that school was Origen, who was the most distinguished advocate of this doctrine in all time. Now, then the quote continues. It says in the first 5 or 6 centuries of Christianity, there were 6 known theological
Yeah.
schools, and these 6 schools were located in cities. Okay, so you had 4 of the 6 schools were Alexandria, Antioch, Caesarea, and Edessa, and
Hmm.
these were all Universalist. So 4 of those schools were all
Wow.
Universalist schools. There was one in Ephesus that taught annihilation, and
Okay.
one that taught eternal torment. Again, so 2 minority views. There's 4 schools teaching universalism, one in Ephesus teaching annihilation, and one teaching eternal torment. And now this is
And
the
the
other,
one,
this
yeah.
is the other shocker. Uh, Guess what city the one school that taught eternal torment where it was located? Rome.
Rome. And what happens in Rome?
Yeah, a few
Hmm.
hundred years
Is
later,
there
did something
anything that's
happen that made
significant?
Rome like really significant?
And you allude to the fact that you're going to get into that later in the book,
Yes.
which is very interesting. I'm excited to read that. But that is interesting. That just absolutely like kind of blows your mind that there are 6 seminaries, if you could say
Yep.
that, or
Essentially.
theological schools, not schools of thought, actual schools in different
Yep.
cities.
Yes.
And the majority of those schools were teaching universal or patristic universalism, which
Yeah.
is just, I don't know, that's just fascinating. So, and then you say, like, for the first 500 years of Christendom, there was no real dogmatic need to align yourself with any particular thought in regards to the afterlife. Can you explain that maybe just a little bit more?
Well, yeah, and that's something that I wanted to point out. It's like, when you realize that for about 500 years of church history, these three views coexisted, and you didn't have Christians dividing over this. You didn't. I mean, certainly there were. I'm sure there were rigorous conversations and debates and like, well, no, you this, and no, you're wrong, it's that. But
Right.
there was people still considered each other brothers and sisters in Christ, even to the point, and I point out in this chapter
Yeah.
also about how when all these different church leaders, church fathers, early church fathers, came together to say, you know what, let's all write down what we agree on as
Yeah.
Christians, as followers of Jesus. What are called the creeds,
The creeds.
and the
Yeah.
creeds are these ancient, statements of faith. Well, here's the thing, another mind-blowing thing. Um, those councils of church fathers that came together, of all these different Christians, that came together to write down these creeds that we hold as the most orthodox,
Right.
these are the simple
The
elements of faith.
hallmark of orthodoxy.
Yes. Yeah. So, some of the guys who sat on those and presided over those were like, Gregory of Nyssa and
Well
Athanasius later.
known.
And these were
Well
universalists,
known. Well, openly. Yeah.
openly on a universalist. And here's the other thing about those creeds. Um, the creeds didn't. So again, what they were coming together to say was, what is it that makes us Christian? What is
Right.
it that we hold as the core of our belief system, right? And
Right.
they wrote these creeds. And those early creeds don't say, and you must believe in eternal torment. Why? Because
Right.
only a very small number did.
Yeah,
And at the
exactly.
same time, now think of it this way
Exactly.
too. Think of it this way too. So let's say again, the majority of Christians believed universalism, and they could have used that majority to force and impose that view on the rest of them and say, no, no,
That's
it's
another good point.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It would have been easy for them to do that, but they didn't. They were gracious to one another to say, look, we all disagree on this, and it's all
Yeah.
right. It's not a big deal. It's not something that decides whether you're a Christian or not. So that's why those early creeds don't contain this insistence that you had to embrace this, annihilation or eternal torment or universalism.
And you really do a good job at modeling that even in this chapter, because you say, hey, it's okay if we have these different views. Actually, you're pretty generous in that regard, you
Yeah,
know?
and I try to be, in the sense that, as I'm learning that from the early Christians, it's like, yeah, I think that's the way to do it. Unfortunately, we're living in a time when um, some people that hold different views don't reciprocate that graciousness.
Yeah.
They're not like,
Yeah.
it's okay, you believe something different. Um,
Yeah. And
but I
it's
still think
okay.
it's a good idea.
Like for me, I'm a little bit unsettled. I'm still learning and growing and developing my thoughts behind some of these doctrines, you know? And I just feel like permission to be able to be in that space. But I love the way you conclude this, and we can conclude here if you want, but I love the way you brought it back to this statement. You say, we're going to explore these doctrines and what they say about the nature and character of God. Because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, that's what I know you to be really interested in. Is not so much these ideas as doctrines themselves, but really how they inform us of our relationship with His nature. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a key
beautiful.
thing to keep in mind too, because, and I do this in the book where we're going to talk about this in the next video. And I do try to look at all three views and be fair about that. But, and that's worth looking at. Absolutely. That's something it means a lot. But we also though need to recognize that whichever of the three views we tend to latch on to
Right.
are going to say something pretty strong about the character of God. You
Yes.
can't embrace that view and then not recognize that. Okay, if that's the view you're going to embrace, recognize
Yeah.
you're saying God is like this,
Right.
or you're saying God is like that, and that
Right.
is tied to this. You can't escape that.
I love that. Thank you so much for chapter 2. I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.